Hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's webinar. Wonderful that you're here. Let's wait a little bit until people arrive in the space. My name is Veronica. I'm the host of the Conscious Relationship School, and I give weekly webinars about relationships and emotional healing. So wonderful that you're here. I also invite you to turn on your cameras. It's always been nice to see each other. And how this essentially works is that I'll guide you through a presentation. But yeah, please feel free to always ask questions. You can unmute yourselves and do that, or of course you can also use the chat. It's really nice to have this like an interactive experience because I'm really deep in these subjects. So sometimes I'm not aware maybe that I'm talking, over my audience's head or something like this. So just ask if something is unclear. I'm really, really happy to answer all the questions. All right, so yes, let's go. Maybe I'll write quickly a little note just that we have got started to remind people. And yes. Live. Cool. All right, cool. Then I'm gonna share my screen and we'll go. All right, so what's the inner child and how to work with it is the topic for today. And I find it always really interested if people have already experience with inner child work or, what has brought you to this subject. So maybe think a bit about this. What specifically interests you about this? And yes, so this is the agenda for today. We're going to talk about what is the inner child, benefits of inner child work, how to connect to your inner child, and also how to take care of your inner child. So both of those things are really, really important. And if you are struggling with your mental health, this can really make a really big impact and a positive change for you. So yes, and if you'd like to join this presentation, you can also do that. You can either scan the QR code or go to menti.com and put in this code. The instructions will always be up here. And yeah, it's quite fun. You can answer questions and so on. So yeah, you're welcome to do that, but you don't have to. It's just an offer. And I think one person has joined. That's really cool. Yeah, we are somehow today like not so many people. I don't know. Usually I put a reminder in 1 hour before, but I just was at the gym, so I didn't do it. We'll see. Maybe some more people come. Yes, and for those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Veronica. I'm a holistic relationship coach. I live in the UK and I'm originally from Germany. And yes, I'm an expert on emotional healing. So exactly what we talk about today, because before I was a relationship coach, I did trauma healing with people and I did a lot of inner child work. So this is really my expertise. So yes, ask all your questions. And I also have another group in the UK where I also teach Conscious Relationship School. And yeah, it's going really well. It's really beautiful. People want to learn about these important subjects and that makes me really happy. And I'm also on TikTok and YouTube if you are interested in learning more from me. Okay. So what's the inner child? I wanted to ask you, what is your ideas about the inner child? You can use the chat or you can also unmute yourself. What do you think? There we go. Peter says it's a mystical concept. Okay. Do you talk about mysticism or do you not know what it is? Rajneesh says your base personality. Interesting. Yeah, so both of this is interesting answers and is definitely connected with this. It's a part of your personality. So yeah, we're gonna get into it, what it is. Yeah, there's someone else saying. Virus says the self who wants to be unconditionally loved, provided for, heard, seen, and touched. Oh, yeah, it's a really nice answer. Definitely, that's a big part of the inner child. Yes. And Peter says, I've heard it referenced multiple times, but don't really understand what people are intending. All right, then I hope I can enlighten you today. All right, so before we understand what the inner child is, it's important to understand how our psyche works. So we are essentially comprised of different parts of our personality. The easiest that you can conceptualize of this is when you are in different situations with different peoples, you are reacting, thinking, and feeling very differently. For example, at work, most people are, not very emotional. They are very in their rational minds, and they are acting quite professional. This is like their professional personality, right? But then, for example, imagine you would visit your mom after work. You can so quickly switch into this like young child again, where maybe you're like, mom, like you talk with her like this, or you get really triggered when she does something, or you want your favorite foods from childhood. So your mom brings out a different part in you, And then, for example, with friends as well, like maybe with some friends, like you are the really responsible one, and a part of you comes up that is like always watching out because your friends are really careless. And maybe with other friends, they are so rigid and stuck up that, a part of you comes out that you are then the careless one, and maybe you drive recklessly or something like this. So those are all different parts of our personality, and it's really, really normal. Like everyone has that. And the thing is, though, that lots of these parts are actually unconscious. And the reason how that happens is because we get shamed in childhood for certain aspects, So, for example, some children, they are really loud and performers, they always want to, for example, I was such a child, I always wanted to perform something in front of my parents and stuff. And some children, when the parents don't like this behavior, they get shamed for it. They say, oh, you always want to be in the center of their attention, for example. And so the child is like, oh my gosh, that's bad, I shouldn't do it. And so they suppress it. It becomes part of their unconscious. And many, many different parts of ours are like this. And when you want to become self-aware, it's really important to understand it, because if you don't know why you're acting the way you're acting, it's because of parts of you that are doing things and you don't understand them. And many people have very similar parts. So we have sort of like group names for them. So one of those is, for example, the inner critic. Maybe you always hear this critical voice inside of yourself, which is like, oh, you don't do this wrong. Like, why are you like this? Can't you be better? That's the inner critic. And many people have this, a part of you that is super perfectionistic. Like, I have to get it right. If not, people won't like me, and so on and so forth. And another group of this is the inner child. So it's a different part of your personality. And some of you will probably be super aware of it, like it when you are like playful and, you can still see the world through a child's eyes. And others of you will be so disconnected from it. And this is usually when, in childhood, you were very often told that those childish qualities are bad, and you should grow up, you should mature, you should not be so emotional. So when we talk about the inner child as part of our personality, what does that actually mean? Like, how can you feel your inner child? So very simply, it's the essence of who you were as a child. It's still within you, and you will never lose it. Even when you're 90 years old, there will still be the essence of how you were as a child. So I always show this picture of myself. This is little Veronica, and she is always within me. She will never, ever, ever go. And I have to make sure that she is fine, because I'm basically her parent now, right? Like my mom and dad, I'm grown up now, so I have to take care of her. And what that means essentially is that you have access to however you were seeing the world. You still have that, So for example, if you would like go in a bit of a meditative state and so, wow, I want to embody now my inner child, and you would open your eyes, you could see the world how you saw it as a child. And what then happens usually is that, like small things becomes really fascinating, like, like flowers or other things. The world would seem really big, and it's just like wondrous, like quality. And at the same time, in your internal family system, you also have an internalized mother and a father, right? So when I speak about reparenting, because if you want to heal emotionally, essentially you have to become the parent that you never had. Whatever things that you were lacking in childhood, let's say my family, for example, they were not super emotionally attuned to me. Like they often didn't know how to react when I was feeling emotional. So now as an adult, I do this for myself, when my inner child, when she is feeling like very vulnerable and sad, then I can step up and, talk to myself like a parent, but in a different and better way than my parents did, essentially. All right, so that was a bit of an introduction. And I know this is really big, so we're going to talk more about this. And now I wanted to ask you guys a question. So which traits do children have that adults often lose? So an example here is playfulness. So go on, use the chat, just write one word. Which traits do children have that adults often lose? And if someone is in here in the presentation, of course, you can also do it here. So Rajnish, I hope I say your name right. It says curiosity. Yes, that's a big one for children, isn't it? Yes. Innocence, says Irene. Yes, innocence is a big one. Loses imagination. Yes, absolutely. Yes, children are so imaginative, right? Like they can play with anything. Jason said adventurousness. Yes, they are super adventurous. Yes. And also dreamy, impractical, idealistic, full of possibilities. Yes, exactly. Peter says non-defensive. Yes, open. Children are very, very open, usually, especially when they're very small. Yes, exactly. Yeah, you totally got it, guys. And someone here also said curious. Yes, definitely. So this is the traits. And yes, here we go. Someone says something else. Gullibility. Yeah, exactly. So here's a list with this young man, with his binoculars. He looks so curious. Wow, what is he gonna see? And of course, also wonder. Wonder is a really big quality, and that's why reconnecting to your inner child can be so amazing, because suddenly you have this sense of wonder again, which is so important for our happiness. Then, of course, also honesty. Children are so honest, and it's so refreshing often because they just say it as it is, isn't it? Then being in the present moment, that's a really big one. Children much less worry about, they don't think so much about the past or worry about the future. Yes, and of course also emotions, So this is the child self that is within all of us. And when we access this child self, when we become aware of it, because for many people it is very suppressed, then all of these qualities, we have access to them, but of course also, so how many people find inner child work is because they are struggling in life and they realize, oh my gosh, I've experienced some traumatic things in my life. And so my inner child is wounded. In psychology, we talk about that wounded inner child. Because the inner child is also the part of you that stores all the trauma that belongs to your childhood, and actually the most traumatic years are from 0 to 7, and trauma does not mean just that when there's an accident or severe violence. It's also very little things like, your parents not being very connected to you, that you didn't feel seen or understood in childhood. That's actually really big deal for children, when you didn't feel like you were belonging to your family. So many of those things are traumas. And this also the inner child stores. And so when people find inner child work, it's like, oh my gosh, I realize I have this inner child aspect and they are hurting, they're wounded. Often when you do visualizations, people see that the children are like bleeding, and because it's representation of the emotional body, yes. And so they are like, okay, I need to heal this inner child. And that can be a very intense thing because, of course, when you have not been aware of your painful emotions for a long time, and then suddenly you start focusing on it, it can be a lot and can be very intense. So many people connect a lot of negativity and hard work with the inner child. But what I want to tell you is that, yes, there is this part when you start reconnecting with it, that it's going to be a bit intense, and lots of suppressed emotions come up, lots of anger, sadness, hurt, disappointment, all those things. But the thing is also, our inner child has so many positive qualities, and they come also up as well. So for example, many people, when they start doing inner child work, they realize, oh my gosh, I have a lot of suppressed desires and interests. Maybe this little young man, he had a natural desire for bird watching, but then maybe his parents didn't like it because they valued that he had to do schoolwork and maybe become a mathematician or something, and so he abandoned his interest. And then maybe with 25, when he's doing self-development, and suddenly he's like, oh my gosh, I still love it, let me re-find that passion for life. And the reason why I tell the story is actually because that's my boyfriend. He's becoming a bird watcher. He's now 31. It's very sweet. And yeah, we have been doing lots and lots of inner child work. And so he is reconnecting with this natural curiosity, because I think about 3 years ago, he said to me, Veronica, I have no passions. I feel passionless. The only thing I do is work. And then I sit in front of the laptop, and watch series or something. And I was like, oof, what's happening here? And of course, everyone has passion, it's like the most natural thing as a human being. But if the suppression for him was locked in the inner child, because he didn't want to feel the pain of his childhood, but so he also didn't feel the desires, interest, and passion. But it came back, and it's a very beautiful process. All right, guys, does this make a little bit sense to you? Like, do you have any questions about this, about your inner child? Yeah, okay, cool. I'm just gonna mute you guys when you're not speaking, otherwise we'll have those background noises. Okay, then we're gonna go get on. Just a moment. Yeah, there's something. Peter says, I have no sense of an inner child. How to find him? Yes. So I think the first step that you can do is that you get in touch with your emotions, because this is like I think the best access you have, because emotions are very, very intense. And so when you are feeling emotions, feel a little bit deeper, like what's underneath there, because usually underneath there's this vulnerability that is our inner child, because when you are feeling very strong emotions, it's usually the inner child that's feeling that, because it's connected to some kind of difficult moment that you were. And another tip that I can also give you is that you try to create a really emotionally safe environment for yourself, because very often when we, especially men, because many men learn from a young age on that it's not safe to be vulnerable, because the parents say, oh, don't cry, that's ridiculous, like you shouldn't do that, and so the experience is as unsafe to go there, because it's other people can hurt us, when we are in this vulnerability. So think about, how can I create an emotionally safe environment for myself, and to really feel and let out the emotions that I'm feeling. All right. Okay, cool. So let's talk a bit about the benefits of the inner child work, which I already alluded lots about. But yeah, of course, healing is a big thing. So many people find inner child work because they want to heal themselves. Also around dysfunctional patterns, because whatever you have, so for example, a very classical thing, like I was working with a client of mine, and she has an unhealthy relationship with food. And so we were investigating where it comes from. And of course, it came from childhood, because her parents never showed her how to deal with her emotions in a healthy way. So what did she do to cope, with the intensity? Because, children experience these intense emotions, and then no one tells them what to do, so they find their own way. And what worked for her was food. She realized, okay, if I eat something, I feel soothed, I feel more calm, and then in adulthood, that was still her coping mechanism. So she never actually grew up out of this coping mechanism. So by doing inner child work with her, we can help her to change that pattern. And I essentially, then the coach or therapist goes into the parent role. And you can also, if you do the inner child work with yourself, you get into that parent role and be like, okay, like, what could we do instead? Is there maybe other ways that we could deal with those intense emotions, And so essentially, it's like you have to recreate developmental steps, because that part of you that is still stress eating is essentially 3 years old and has never grown out of that age. And that's how you heal that. But then, of course, also to get closer to your core essence, So what I shared in the beginning, imagine that this is a vital part of you, And if you are suppressing it and you're not aware of it, you are cut off from a big part of your own personality, And for example, what you can watch with people that do inner child work is they become much more relaxed and happy in the moment. They find nature fascinating again. They are reconnecting with passions, and it's just a more rich life experience, essentially. And then when it comes to your reconnecting to your emotions, the reason why it's so important to do that is because your emotions are your internal guidance system. They are your compass, So there's a reason we have emotions. It's not just to annoy us, but they will always tell us if we are on the right path, or if there's some wounds that we have not addressed and that we have to, it would be positive to address them, because we could have a better, more wonderful life experience afterwards. And that's why I'm so critical of any sort of like medication that numbs us, because it actually takes that away from us, And if we learn how to feel our own emotions, then all of this is not necessary. We don't need to numb ourselves. We can learn that. It's skills. Then, of course, also your inner child will tell you a lot about your needs. Many people run around and continuously bring themselves into unhealthy situations in relationships or at work or so on, because they're so disconnected from their inner child, who would actually tell them, look, I actually feel super uncomfortable in this work environment, because people are super harsh and I really hate it, Or they tell them, okay, we can stay at this job, but I need some ways to protect myself, or I need some more empowering ways to talk to my colleagues, for example, And your inner child will tell you this. And then, of course, also your genuine joy. I mean, look at this little man here, Children have this natural connection to joy, and you still have that in you. When you connect to your inner child, you will find that, and it's really, really beautiful. All right. Is there any questions about this, or has anyone already had experiences with inner child work? All right, cool. Then we can go on. Yes. So yes, maybe you can think about, what's the relationship with your inner child? So I have no relationship. I'm somewhat aware of it. I feel very connected to my inner child. I don't understand children. I find it very difficult to imagine there's one in me. So if you're in the chat, you can maybe just answer 1 till 4, depending on which answer is most suitable to you. And yeah, here in the chat, someone said, I'm somewhat aware of it. Nice. I would say that's probably most people. They're like, oh, I kind of like get it, but I want to know more. So I'm going to join this webinar. And I feel very connected to my inner child. That's really beautiful. Very nice. Yeah, with my clients, it's actually with my coaching clients, with almost every one, I'll do this one exercise where I essentially tell them to find a picture of them as a child and put them in a place in their home where they can see it every day, where they just walk by. And then the picture, of course, symbolizes your inner child. And then you start just connecting with it and, see what emotions come up. Often people feel maybe uncomfortable or like sadness comes up or something like this. And that is all how you start connecting with your inner child. And I even, talk to her and say like, hey, little Roni, how are you doing today? And it's like a way to reconnect with this part of myself, and it's really beautiful. It's such a simple exercise, but it's so beneficial. So yeah, if that's something that you want to start with, I would encourage you to do that. Sweet. 3 people I feel very connected to my inner child. That's really nice. I'm very happy about that. But please, one person is like coloring on Karen, please don't color on the presentation. It always happens. Like one person's always doing that. I don't know what's happening there. Yes, it's the inner child. It's like painting. All right, guys, cool. So here we go. Yeah. So let's talk about how to connect with your inner child. What can you actually do? I shared already a few things. Get in touch with your emotions. You can have the picture in your flat and start, connecting like this way. What else is there to do? Yes. So whenever you feel triggered, that's actually a sign for you that there are unhealed emotional wounds as well as unmet needs from childhood. So what a trigger is essentially when you are having a big emotional reaction to a relatively small event, So for example, when your partner promises to bring out the garbage and they don't do it, and it just brings out this intense anger in you, what is happening there essentially? Because it's not about the garbage, this is a very small event, but probably things are triggered around that you don't feel supported, that you don't feel seen, heard, that you think they don't care about you, that you think that everything is on you. You have to be the one who is in control of everything, So, and those feelings are connected to deeper experiences in your childhood. So that's what a trigger is. So, whenever you are in your relationship and this happens, be aware that it's not your partner doing this, but it's deeper things that are happening. And of course, it is also annoying if, we ask our partner to do this a long time, but the emotional reaction is not, they are not responsible for that. That's something in us that is being triggered. And essentially what's happening is that your inner child is feeling those emotions because it has something to do with how you as a child were experiencing life. Maybe you grew up in a very chaotic family and you had this feeling that you needed to do much more than what, you had much more responsibility than was fair. Or maybe you felt like no one was ever seeing you, you were asking for things and people were not responding to you, So those are those deeper emotional things. So when you are feeling triggered, this is your connection with your inner child. You're like, okay, what's happening right now? Why is this making me so angry and so upset? And then usually there will be some little voices being like, yes, they don't love you, they don't care about you. And that's your inner child telling themselves the same story that they told themselves when they were small. Can these triggers also come from past relationships, Peter says? So the thing is that your past relationships essentially are just a mirror for your parent relationships. So, most people are unaware of their childhood. They have either forgotten everything, or it's very scary to actually admit to ourselves that we have suffered in one way or the other in childhood, because we are scared that it will ruin our relationship with our parents. But the age when you were traumatized is from 0 to 7, and everything that comes after that is just a mirror experience, because you will find partners later in life that are the same in some ways as your parents, right? And so they reinforce these things. But if you do trauma work, you always go back to childhood. Like a trauma does not, you're not being traumatized when you're 15 or 16. That doesn't happen. It's always these earlier experiences, you know. And it's totally okay. Like, you know, you don't have to hate your parents or have a bad relationship with them, because of course, most of the time they did the best they could with what they have, and usually they had like far worse childhood, right? Like I always tell the story that my parents were really loving, but they just didn't know many things. And my father, for example, like his mom was so crazy and disconnected from him, like she sometimes threw knives at him when she was angry, you know. So he already did such a good job with me, but he could just not fulfill all my emotional needs. It was just not possible for him. So yeah, that's that. A good question. Yes. And when you're working with triggers, it's really important to understand, what do you make the situation mean? Because this is the key, you know. Because, for example, when you think about the garbage example, many people, what will come up is, when my partner doesn't bring up the garbage, it means they don't love me. And that's obviously like a belief that has been created, you know, which has probably nothing to do with reality. Probably they are just really stressed and don't think about it, you know, whatever it is. But it's like a false belief that you have about reality, essentially. And that's your access point to your inner child. Because when this happened in childhood, they made the same assumptions, you know. For example, so many people, when there's a divorce, so many children, when there's a beloved beliefs, it's about themselves. Like, I caused this, you know, I was bad, and so my parents broke up. And then they have this like shame. They carry this for the rest of their lives. They're not even aware of it. And so it can be so healing when you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, my parents' divorce had nothing to do with me. It was about them, you know. And it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me. And it just makes you a more relaxed person, because you are don't carry these like heavy emotions, and you don't interpret bad things your partner do in a way that it's about you. You know, there must be something wrong with you, otherwise they wouldn't behave the way they do. So this is a good introduction here into trauma work for you guys. Yes. Does anyone else have a question or a comment? Someone's painting again. Yes, all right. Yeah, also what I wanted to say is, you know, if any one of you is like struggling with this stuff, like I offer one-on-one coaching sessions where we can heal all those things, where you can look at that, you know, where you can reconnect to your inner child. Yes, just go on my website, and I find all the coaching offers there. You can also send me a little message, and I can also give you some advice. It would be a good idea. But, you know, doing this work is so incredibly beneficial. Like, I would say most people that struggle with mental health, that's the reason, you know, because they have never learned how to feel their emotions. They are so disconnected to themselves. They're constantly like suppressing, you know, and it's not so much that there's something wrong with you. It's more about, you know, society, and that why do we not learn this in school, you know? And that's essentially what I do with people. I teach them those skills. And once you learn it, you can always do it yourself. And it's like a beautiful journey, actually, where, yes, you will have uncomfortable emotions and so on, but you will also have such a more rich and wonderful life experience, because suddenly you are whole again. You know, you are your whole self. And yeah, for me, I like invest most of my money in self-development, because yeah, my life has gotten so much better. And I used to thought, you know, that I was depressed and I used to really suffer. I used to feel so lonely and all those things. And now, yeah, my life has changed so much. I have a wonderful relationship and it is possible. So yeah, believe in yourself. And yes, all right. Now, the other thing that you can also do, especially if you are maybe like more of an artistic person and you are more self-expressive, is parts work. So how I started with inner child work was actually like this. It was in a workshop, maybe 5 years ago or so on. And I was with a group of women, and our practitioner told us to embody our inner children. So we were like, 3 of us went into like a group, and then for 10 minutes, everyone should embody their inner child. So it's essentially like so simple. You just close your eyes, and then you just imagine that your inner child is like taking over your body, and that you're like acting out your inner child, and you connect with this energy. So it's a little bit of a intuitive process. But yeah, what we then did was just feel into it. And for example, my friend's inner child, she wanted to lie in the grass and look at the clouds. I wanted to do like a dance routine, because that's what I always did as a child. I always was thinking about dance routines. Other ones are more like, maybe want to play like a game, like catch or something like this. So really, really, really simple. And that will get you connected again with these needs, and also the way you see the world, because in trauma work, it's so important that we start to understand how our inner child sees the world, because a lot of the traumas, as I said, they seem very small now that we are adults, because we have a different concept of the world. For example, many children get traumatized when they are going to a birthday party and someone else gets a present and they don't get a present. And the reason for this is that they don't understand. They have no concept of a birthday. They're just 5 years old, and it feels really unfair that someone else gets a present and I don't get it, right? So, and when we connect with our inner child, we can start to understand them, understand their perspective, because the best, most healing thing to do with a child that feels this jealousy is to understand and be like, wow, I get it, man. I would also feel jealous. It's quite intense, right? Like, you don't know what's happening, And of course, you then don't reinforce their behavior and give them a present or something like this, but you help them through the emotion, and you also validate them and say, yes, it makes sense. If you don't understand what a birthday is, it feels unfair. And you know what? That's okay. And then it doesn't become a trauma, because you help the child feel the emotion, maybe scream a little bit like, but then also go into this understanding, and then the emotion doesn't get stuck, but it's essentially being expressed. And that's a really big part of inner child work, because if you can't validate your inner child experiences, you cannot heal it, If you are having this attitude like, oh, like, why did you make such a big fuss when you were 4 years old and it happened? It's ridiculous, That's not a healing energy at all. Like, your inner child will be like feeling the same as your parents, will not understood, that you just don't get it. And yeah, there's no connection there. There's no seeing each other. Yes, so that is parts work, and it is really, really healing. And it's also really fun, to do that. Also, imagine when you have your own children, it can be really cool to do that sometimes, to see life from their perspective, or just like have some fun with them. And we all have this in us, because we all were once children. So even if it feels really far away, if you practice it, and maybe in the beginning it's very small, but it gets bigger and bigger, and you can do it really easily. Like, I can slip into my inner child at any moment if I just want to, but it's a conscious choice. That's the other thing as well also, is that because most people, they go into the inner child very unconsciously. It's like, for example, in a relationship, they don't get what they want, and then they start to be a tantrum and like, no, like, I don't want this, and this energy, but they can't stop it. And that's the inner child then coming out involuntarily. And our goal is that we can do it, that we know when this is happening, and that we can stay in our, mature adult when we want to, and only go into the inner child when it's chosen. And that's real maturity. That's real freedom, because of course you can ruin many things in your life. It's the same at work. Imagine you're getting into this like childish energy when something triggers you. Well, it can really ruin your career, right? So that is the goal with all of this, to make it aware and conscious. Does that make sense to you guys? Would you know something about this? While I wait, I'm just gonna. So just my notes for later, that you also have my links if you wanna ask me something. Okay, cool. All right, you are a quiet group. Yes, as I said, feel always free to ask me something. I'm very happy to answer your questions. All right, cool. So the last part of this is how to take care of your inner child. So the goal of this essentially is to cultivate a wise inner parent. And that means that you become the parent that you never had, essentially. You know, the way you talk to yourself really, really matters. You know, the way you talk to your inner child really, really matters. And you can, like, even if you've had the most horrible relationship with your parents and you don't speak to them, you know, and let's say the worst thing, you would never even see them before they die. If you can cultivate a wise inner parent that is really, really loving, you can become very, very healed, you know. And that is really good news, because of course it's also really beautiful. Like, many people also reunite with their parents when they do inner child work, so that's really beautiful. But you can also do it within yourself. You don't need your parents to become whole and healed again. And the most important thing here is that we start talking to ourselves in a loving way, and also that we understand our own needs and meet them. You know, what I said in the beginning, many inner children feel often unsafe in certain situations. How can we create real safety for ourselves, you know? But then, of course, also often adults are not having enough fun, you know? Maybe what we really, really want, what our inner child really wants, is that once a day we turn up the music and we start dancing really crazy, you know? Or that we do more fun activities in our life, you know? So there can be many, many needs not being met. It could also be that, of course, needs of connection. Maybe we have become a little loners. We're always just in front of our laptop watching Netflix alone, and our child is, man, like, hey, I'm so lonely, you know, I want you to do more things with other people. So those are the needs that we can meet now as adults, essentially. And then, of course, also to honor what we are experiencing emotionally and validate that, make it okay, you know, because your emotions, they always have a reason. They are never irrational. There's always a reason why they are happening. And if we can do that, that's when we become the really, really loving parent, because most of the adults in our life have been dismissive, critical, or very, very invalidating of our experience. And how we heal that is to reverse that, essentially. And I did the session 2 weeks ago in my other group. And there was this one girl, it was so funny. She's like, after I held the presentation, I was like, so what do I do practically? You know, I mean, apart from the reparenting. And I was like, wow, like, reparenting is like the highest, almost the highest form of spiritual practice you can do. If you did real reparenting, then, you know, you're going to be like enlightened, essentially. So yes, it's a really, really deep practice, you know, and it's a big endeavor as well, you know. So I've been doing this for a few years now, but it's a continuing process. And yeah, it's a very, very deep experience. All right, so I always lose this chat here every time, man. Hello, come here. Oh, I can't find it. Can someone type something, please, in the chat? Then it will pop up for me. Oh, thanks. Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, guys. So I put in the chat all my links. The first one is my website. Please check it out. You know, if you want to do one-on-one sessions, feel free to reach out. I would super like to work with you. I have a lot of experience, and yes, I also love to do it. So it would be really nice. But then also, if you like this presentation and you want to support my work here in Meetup, please consider buying me a coffee. You just click on the second link, and you can support my work, you know, with a very small donation. And yeah, you can help the webinars here, that I prepare them really well. And yes, I put a lot of love into this, so it would be really beautiful if you could do that. Okay, so if someone has one last question, I'm super happy to answer them. Otherwise, yes, thank you for participating today. I'm happy to have you. I hope you learned something and that it became more clear to you what the inner child is and what it is about. And, you know, also don't feel bad about yourselves if you are disconnected. Most people have no idea, you know, and they maybe are only aware of themselves like 20% or so, and that's okay. You know, this is really how society has been, how it's been set up, and you can do something about this in small steps, and wherever you are is good and is okay, you know, and just showing up is so beautiful and valid. Yes. Yeah, and also if you want to rewatch this episode, I will link it in the comments as well. So you're happy to do that. And yes, Peter, yes, process this content. Yes, do that, exactly. Think a bit about it. And yeah, all the best to you guys. And see you soon. Yes. All right. Bye-bye.